We got a lot of active duty military and folks holding that wanted to comment on what we were covering last hour. The fact that the military is being trained for gun confiscation, it's in the news, but that more and more military is saying no and going public and saying, I'm not going to be part of this. This is unconstitutional. So that's coming up with Ed, Bud, Preston, and others that are holding. I've got several big news blitzes that I want to cover as well, like Woody Allen. It would be good if Obama could be a dictator. Remember Bush? Things would be a heck of a lot easier if this was a dictatorship, just so long as I'm the dictator. Blanche Flower, Europe could break up, another bailout inevitable. These stories are all up at gcnlive.com. So a whole bunch of key news coming up here after I take some more of your phone calls. We do have Dr. Edwin Vieira on the state of the Constitution, the true role of the militia, and programs and plans he has to take back the states at the state level. So solutions coming up in the fourth hour. But I appreciate her coming on. He relayed an email to her, and she got it to us. And so I called his lawyer, David Hammer's lawyer, Jesse Trinidad, and talked to his paralegals and confirmed that she's been a key Oklahoma City researcher who got in with Jesse Trinidad to get the signed affidavit from Terry Nichols, one of the co-conspirators on the Oklahoma City bombing, that yes, McVeigh was a government operative and told him he was an operative. Then we separately have police, military, other testimony. We've gotten secret federal documents that Trinidad has sued in federal court to be released, where the head of the FBI anti-terror force was in Oklahoma City and lied about it and was intimately involved. I've interviewed people that survived in the Alfred P. Murrah building 15 years ago, like Jane Graham. I'm just recapping this, who saw McVeigh and military operatives in there as maintenance people, planning gray sticks of butter. She thought they were working on the telephones. I mean, it goes on and on. This was a government operation. So to even get into Oklahoma City, it almost does it disservice to just briefly talk about it, but that's all the time we have today. Now, Mr. Hammer hadn't been allowed to do interviews, which, when I have the federal court rulings, is unconstitutional, for 11 years. The last interview he did was with the L.A. Times. And, of course, he talked and was, with McVeigh for years, and before they even built the Terre Haute, Indiana Federal Execution Center. He was at the previous federal facility where they were holding him before that, and McVeigh told him all this. He's written 2 books on the subject. Margaret Roberts, a journalist who wrote the preface for Hammer's 2004 book, Secrets Worth Dying For, Timothy McVeigh and the Oklahoma City bombing. We were contacted by him, and so I talked to the law office and others, and they marched into Hammer, and we have his whole account. Now he's been put on lockdown and solitary confinement. They took away his phone privileges where he's allowed to call. That's why you didn't, hear the background noise of this is a correctional facility, because it was his private, legal call. But he was able to get through to us on that system. And this really fell in our lap. I mean, I knew about Hammer, and I knew about the Oklahoma City information, and I knew that he'd done an interview a few weeks before on Anti-War Radio, which is a pretty big website. And I checked into it, and there's nothing illegal about interviewing him. In fact, what they're doing is illegal under the First Amendment. I mean, I don't want to be arrested and disappear into a black hole, and I can't ever get out to the media. But they did come and grab him, and he is fearing for his life, and they told him they wanted to take him to an unscheduled middle-of-the-night medical exam, but he refused. And you do have control over yourself in medical issues. It's one of the few rights you still have on death row. And I'm not saying David Hammer is a perfect person, but his whole story matches with the stuff we already have, the info we already have in triplicate. Plus, he is on death row for basically killing somebody in a fight in prison. I'm not saying that's good. That's bad. He was in prison for something else, and then went on death row for murder in prison. So very, very serious information. But we have this new development, and it's up on Infowars.com. Key Oklahoma bombing witness denied access to attorneys, fears for his life, by Kurt Nemo. And then it has the full letter in here by David Hammer. But right now, we're going to go to Margaret Roberts, who's been a key researcher involved in this for years. Margaret, good to have you with us.
Thank you, Alex. It's good to be here. I wish it was under other circumstances.
Absolutely. How are they keeping him from talking to the media, even though courts are ruling they can't do this?
Well, I think what happens is, in theory, these inmates are allowed to have interviews, but every time somebody specifically, some reporter or producer specifically requests an interview with Hammer, it's denied. So it's, time and time again, he has not been able to speak to the media.
Now, just recapping briefly Hammer's case, do that for us because you've been an integral part of the research, and then currently flesh out what's in his letter about the type of persecution he's going through for the information he's put out here, because the feds told him, if you won't write this book about McVeigh being a U.S. government agent and saying that they were going to stage his death, which is what two separate reporters said at the time. He was still breathing when McVeigh was brought out, when he was executed. He doesn't have any motive to be doing this except that he is telling the truth.
Yeah, I think he really doesn't have a motive. You see Hammer say, I'm going to die in prison. And actually, Alex, the reason I agreed to write the preface, I actually wrote the preface for this new book, Deadly Secrets. And the reason I did that was that as a journalist, I knew very well that credibility was going to be the issue for David Hammer. And I've been following your website here this morning, and I see that this has kicked up quite a lot of noise, and people are rightly saying, why should we believe this guy on death row? As I wrote in my preface, as a reporter in Chicago, I broke a big story way back in the 1980s about an innocent prisoner on death row, and he was proved to be innocent, and the real killers were discovered, and he walked free. And to me, the lesson was, yes, you have to exercise great scrutiny when you examine a story that's coming off death row, but at the same time, Alex, the truth can come off death row. So that was the lesson there for me. I was a producer for America's Most Wanted, and in 2005 started looking into this Oklahoma City bombing from the fugitive aspect, John Doe number 2. I know you've covered this. That's when I ran into Jesse Trinidu and David Hammer's interviews with Timothy McVeigh, and the possibility that Jesse Trinidu's brother Kenneth, who was a mysterious prison suicide in quotation marks, that he may have been linked to the bombing. So that's how I became involved in this research. And through it, now for several years, have watched as Jesse Trinidu and David Hammer have collaborated, and then David, has been off on his own paths, and find it very impressive what David has synthesized from his own researches, conducted from, of all places, his cell in death row, as well as covering what Jesse's done, what the excellent investigative reporter J.D. Cash did too. So, and through this period, Alex, Hammer has been volunteering to step forward and tell his story. I noticed that one of your writers to the website this morning was commenting on the demeanor, the tenor of Hammer's presentation to you in that excellent hour-long interview you did last week. The human voice tells a lot about credibility. That's all Hammer has ever asked to do, is to step forward and tell his story. But the FBI has fought tooth and nail all the way up to federal appellate courts to shut Hammer up. And I think any reasonable mind would have to ask, 15 years after the fact, why is that so important that you not allow a man to tell a story?
Well, even more than that, certainly there's a cover-up going on, and they're fighting very hard to continue it.